Well, hello, BookTube. This is Peg at the History Shelf with my wonderful friend.
Bill from the Rutenberg Library. I
There
can't
you
remember
go.
where it's from.
Yeah. We're a little, it's been one of those days, but Happy New Year, everybody.
Yes, Happy New Year.
And here's to a year of health and reaching our reading goals. But with that out of the way, we are here today to talk about a book that we finished a little while ago, but then, holidays came, right? And then sickness came, and then we just didn't have a chance to do our wrap up. But we're here today to do our wrap up. Catastrophe 1914, Europe Goes to War by Max Hastings, who is an awesome writer and historian. And this had been on my shelf for a very long time. And I'm not sure, was it on your shelf just about as long as mine, maybe years, or did you just pick it up one day?
I just picked it up at, let's see, it would have been 2021. It had been November of 2021 because I take my kids to the World War I museum in Kansas City. It's the National Museum.
Yeah.
I take my seventh graders there, and I popped into the bookshop, and that was one of them that was sitting out there, and so I picked it up.
That's outstanding. Well, we both realized that, Bill and I have done buddy reads before, and mostly I'd say like antebellum period, right? And Civil War kind of stuff. And we both agreed that, World War I is something we both are interested in. And it's been a while since I've read one. And I was like, it's time for me to tackle Hastings. And then you had seen the book. So it just was a natural, it was very, a moment of serendipity that we just came together and said, let's buddy read this. So 1914, Europe Goes to War. It read like butter. I don't know. Just on the writing style alone, we would try to typically read a couple chapters per week. And then kind of, leave our Voxer messages as you do with these buddy reads. And we always had notes, but what was your overall impression of the book, Bill? I love the way Hastings wrote, and I loved the fact that it indeed, when you go to this book, you kind of forget it's only about 1914, right? And he really zeroes in on that year. I love anything that Hastings does, so I really enjoyed this one.
Well, this was my first Hastings book. I'd never read Hastings before.
Okay.
And you said that this is about 1914, and really the majority of the book is actually the second half of 1914. At the very beginning, it talks about early 1914, but probably the bulk of it is the second half. So he really breaks down those last 6 months of the war, and you learn a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My overall take, you said it reads like butter. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I don't like that because I would get to reading, I would take a couple of notes, and then I would get to reading, and next thing you know, I'm 20 pages back or further on, and I hadn't taken any notes because I was so sucked into the reading in his storytelling. And that was something that really made an impression on me. A good writer can do that to you. He was really good at using the primary sources to help tell the story. His use of letters and diaries and all of that kind of stuff, newspaper clippings. And the other really big thing that stood out to me was how he not only used like the opinions of the generals, like everybody does, but he went down to the modern or the average Joe, the private in the military. And he talked he used women's points of view. He used just people back home, their points of view. And so I was really amazed at the vast amount of sources he used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It was a really like a holistic approach to history in this one. Like you said, he took these sources from every strata of society and then seamlessly wove it into the narrative. And it's when you're reading it, you're like, he makes it look so easy, but gosh, how much work do you think that is to just even write a page a day? Like as a writer myself, I'm like, oh my God, I can't even,
Well, that would take me a lifetime. I don't know how long it took him, but it would have taken me a while.
Yes. Yeah. And I love the fact that you got the map of Europe behind you, which is so pertinent to our discussion, you know.
Well, I thought it was actually across the room, and it was a pretty boring black background. So, because I have to do this video in my classroom. So I put that up. We've been covering World War II. So
yeah,
I erased everything I had marked on there so it would fit.
That's perfect. But yes, thanks also for, correcting the fact that it was the second half of 1914. I think in the beginning of the book, he kind of he does like a little bit of a lead up, you know. He does start off in chapter 1 from 1895. Like he wants to set the stage for like how things are about to change big time, you know. For the continent, and then he gives like a little bit of background on each of the players of in this drama, as it were. He talks about where Austria-Hungary, you know, was at during the first few decades before, or the first. Well, yeah, I'd say the first 2 decades before the breakout of hostilities.
Yeah, their situation with the monarchy and
yes,
all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you know, he kind of talks about the Kaiser in Germany and where they were at. And also along the way, you know, we get an insight into, you know, obviously where France was at and Britain and Russia to another extent. But mostly he was talking about just the problems within Serbia. And they're wanting to take down the is it not the Habsburgs, the Hohenzollerns, right? Sorry, I think that's the name of the ruling class in Austria-Hungary, right? Or maybe it was the Habsburg dynasty.
Habsburgs.
Yeah, it was the Habsburgs. Okay. But, you know, yeah, and then the Germans have the Hohenzollerns, and there's a lot of names here, folks, that we kind of
we got a good giggle out of.
We did get a giggle.
Trying to pronounce some of them.
Oh my gosh, for real. Like as we were getting into the beginning of this book, everybody, I know that I had to cross-reference names a lot. Did you have to do that? Like, okay, so like Prince Ruprecht was with Germany, you know, and then Hotzendorf, the Konrad Hotzendorf, that was a great name. He was with Austria, you know. I'm just trying to keep all of these names straight.
Yeah, and of course, for me, you know, being the good old American I am, I can't understand other people's names. You know, I say that in jest, but
yeah,
it got confusing.
Yeah,
it was a lot of names.
There was a lot of names going on here. Let's see. So again, the difficulty, it wasn't a difficulty. The fact that this was so well written, I was like breezing through the first like 5 chapters, just kind of like, yep, that's about right. You know, that this is, I've kind of read of this before, these type of run-ups to the, you know, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand of Austria, who was crown prince. He wasn't the leader. He was the heir to the throne.
Yeah, heir to the throne.
Right. But I did like how he set up, it was like chapter 2, I think, the descent to war. The Austrians threaten, the Habsburg Empire. I thought this was interesting. I'm just going to read this real quick from the beginning of chapter 2. If the Habsburg Empire witnessed little sincere mourning for Franz Ferdinand following his assassination, Austrian rage towards its perpetrators was manifest. When I read that, I was like, poor Franz. Like, no one really cared too much that he was, you know, assassinated, and his wife was murdered too, right next to him. But later on, in the beginning portion of Hastings' book, he does make the case that he thinks, you know, the Serbians and everyone else kind of shot themselves in their own foot, because if anyone was going to be willing to make reforms to keep Austria-Hungary together, this multi-ethnic, religious, multicultural empire, it would have been Franz Ferdinand, because his father was such a, just a martinet and a very rigid reactionary leader. But Franz Ferdinand would have probably instituted some more, more sweeping reforms, possibly. I mean, we don't know. It's always the what ifs of history. But so I thought that was an interesting part of Hastings' book. And he kind of makes the case for Franz Ferdinand that most people haven't in history.
I agree. Let's see. There was something I had taken here. Never mind. Forget it.
If it comes to you. So, and as we moved into the story, so obviously this was the summer crisis of 1914. So the assassination happened, it was in June, right? I think the very end of June. And then there was like this whole month of brinksmanship, I believe. I don't know if it was a month's worth or a week's worth.
It was about a month's worth.
About a month's worth. Okay.
Yeah, and that was something that's what I was looking at here. The note I took was on page 68. Many influential people question the wisdom of shattering European peace to save squalid little Serbia. That's the quote I pulled from there. And that brings out the big question. When do you stand up for a smaller nation despite the chance of losing lots of lives? When is it officially worth it? And, officially worth it. Of course, if I'm Serbia, I'm thinking, well, any time's worth it, but for the bigger nations, when especially, hindsight's 2020, knowing how many lives were lost, was that worth it? That always becomes the big question.
Was it worth it? And obviously, so Russia was the one who was taking Serbia's side on that, right? They had more skin in the game. I don't think, Britain really cared. They didn't want to get drug into this. It was only with the invasion of Belgium. Well,
and Hastings does a good job of pointing out that Britain's army really at the beginning stages was not prepared for this fight. They didn't have enough men. Of course, their navy was built up. Their navy's always built up, but the army was not built up and prepared.
No, they were not.
But you could argue that, about a couple different countries, but, that's just the way it is.
Well, I really like that broader question you just raised, and I think this is where, this book, it raises a lot of those big questions, like, one of them being how many human lives, is it okay to throw at the maw of war, to achieve a political goal. I mean, how much is okay? And I don't think any one of these people expected a war to last 4 years, let alone 4 months. So I think at the time they weren't thinking long term. They were just like, no, I think we can, we'll get either the Allies. What was it? So France, Russia, and Britain. I think they were kind of thinking we'll get them to like leave Belgium and just kind of draw back to the borders, and that'll be, there'll be probably 1 or 2 battles just to stamp our feet. But it again, with history, it's like you just never really know what forces are going to take over, and that you can't control. What you're unleashing. It's like the Bible says, you reap the whirlwind. And
really opened Pandora's box is what they did.
They really did. And all these demons just came roaring out. It was just horrific, the slaughter. And that was just reading in the latter half of 1914 alone. It was astounding to me that how many casualties they already had with like the mobile warfare.
Well, okay. So you'd asked me what earlier, I think before we started recording, what really kind of stood out to me with this book? When that, which I think you had asked me that.
Yeah. What surprised you the most?
Okay, so what surprised me the most? Of course, I knew that this became a trench war. I knew that. But I did not, before I went, because I don't think I've read any detailed stuff on World War I. I've read bits and pieces here and there. This is kind of my first detailed book on it. So really what stood out to me was in those first few months, how long it took the generals to figure out to duck and cover. The massive amount of death that we saw with these men marching across no man's land in front of machine guns, thinking they can defeat a machine gun just by overwhelming it, which is not the case. And I had an old professor in college, Dr. Tryphon, and he used to always say that this was 20th century warfare with 19th century thinking. And they're going back to those old methods. Nobody knew how to use this new technology. And that's really the thing that stood out to me, how many major battles we saw where hundreds of thousands of men died because they weren't smart enough to hide behind something, to duck and cover.
Yes. It was definitely a case where men were even using cavalry, right? All these antiquated tactics and military structures. I mean, cavalry, charging a entrenched position, or with machine gun pits. I mean, and I felt bad for all these horses too, I just have to say.
Yeah. I always give the kids in class some of the quotes from Sir Douglas Haig, and he was an ex-cavalryman. And he said some things, and I'm paraphrasing here. I'm not going to say I'll get it word for word, but he said that basically the machine gun has nothing on the horse. It has no stopping power over the horse. And I can't remember the exact quote, but it always it's mind-boggling that you would think that way.
Yeah.
It would only take one battle to figure things out. Maybe you mess up one battle. You got to have a chance to fix things, but they didn't fix things for several months.
Yes. Yeah. And in the meantime, it's just the killing continued. Like you said, or like your teacher said, it was 20th century warfare, but with 19th century, I'll say military tactics. So, gosh, there's so many things we could talk about from this book. I was intrigued how he kind of broke down. I guess for me, if I turn the question to myself, like, what about this book surprised me the most is I wasn't aware of the severe disconnect, a lack of clear communication and delegation that existed with almost all of the major commands.
Very consistent.
Well, yeah, whether acts, central powers or allied powers. It's like these people worked in a silo, with the Germans. They were kind of on board with the Schlieffen plan, right? Which was just to overwhelm France first, and then, then we can move things to the Eastern Front and tackle the Russians. But obviously that didn't go according to plan. The French did put up some resistance, and finally the British what's that?
Belgians put up a fight there.
The Belgians did. They weren't expecting the Belgians to defend their homeland. Yeah. And then the British Expeditionary Force came on, but you kept reading about just all these different officers and just not communicating well with each other, not liking each other. All this petty stuff was getting in the way of clear action, just resulting in, more, really just not, it wasn't a cohesive, approach to war, because again, I guess this came into play too. I had a note on this. It was like not only were their own communications with each other kind of stifled because they didn't want to give any other general the ability to kind of rise above the others, is like that gamesmanship stuff, but also the technology of communications at the time was really slow as well. So it's like technology, really was cumbersome.
Mm-hmm.
This came out really clear as well. So it's like those two things between the military leadership not sharing plans with each other, not communicating, not wanting to give up a patch of ground to someone else's glory, or you know what I mean. It's the pride, and then you had crappy technology,
Mm-hmm.
so that guys were at headquarters 30 miles behind the lines weren't getting news about what was happening if someone's getting routed on the field. I mean, so they were always acting in a delay,
Yeah. There's a delay, and didn't we read about, and correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there a couple times where there were messages that were just not passed along?
Yes.
On purpose because of that petty
infighting. Yes. Yeah. That was disheartening to read that. It's like, and I think because you were really expressing a lot of passion in the Voxer messages about just the loss of the poor Joe at the the grunt, that everyone else is bickering above them for things that just don't matter, and human lives are just being wasted, just being thrown into the
and it's sick.
It is sick.
Yeah, and that lack of communication, was it Tannenberg, where the Russians, the lack of communication between the North and South, when they split to go around the lake,
yes,
it crushed the Germans, and communication prevented that from happening. Am I recalling that?
I think you are. I think you're. Yes, because the Russian army. That was the other thing too. I think the Russian army's performance at Tannenberg was like just a foretaste of like how Stalin was going to use his forces in World War II. Basically, we're just going to take the sheer number, because they did. That's the one thing Russia had: numbers, millions and millions and millions. And he's like, we're just going to cram you into the the slaughter chute until you overwhelm the people.
I will tell you something. This is a little off, but with Russia, one of the things that really surprised me is I've always read and learned that Russia was, backwards. They were behind the times, and they didn't have enough just stuff. And Hastings, if I remember right, Hastings points out that they actually, like with railroads and stuff, they had more railroads than most of the industrialized nations.
Mm-hmm.
That really surprised me because that should have, if everything was going like it should, that should have allowed them to move troops back and forth faster than what they did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm remembering that correct? Isn't that what he was saying?
Yes. But yes, they did. But again, it was like no one really knew what the left hand was doing at the front. So if the right wing of the army didn't understand what was happening on the left until a day later, I mean that news is old. I mean the way those armies were moving, but obviously the result of Tannenberg on the Eastern Front was the fact that it elevated Hindenburg and Ludendorff, the German generals, to a sphere of new influence. Whereas in the early days, we're dealing with guys like Falkenhayn. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to throw out some names. Moltke, okay, and he was a hot mess, von Moltke. I mean, I just have so many different notes of just why were these guys not talking to each other? And then Kaiser Wilhelm, he was just, everyone was cut off from everyone else as far as really knowing what the goal was, what we're doing, and here's how we're going to achieve it. So it's just amazing to me that they were even able to do a huge wheeling movement around the left flank of France and the British Expeditionary Force. Didn't they call it the race to the sea or something? That big, those summer battles. Mm-hmm. Then the mobile part of the war before everything just turned into trench warfare. And this is where the book really there's a lot going on. There's a lot of numerous battles, right? There's the Battle of Mons. there's the Battle of so Tannenberg in the east was the big one, but just to get back to the book, I was really impressed that Hastings also took time to cover the smaller fightings that were going on in didn't he have I think he had a chapter on Poland, or am I thinking of another book I just recently read? He covered like the
bounce back and forth.
Yeah, and there was yes, because there was a chapter called Three Armies in Poland. That was a great chapter. But also he covered the Austrian army and their front down in Serbia. Mm-hmm. And let's see here. So just real quick, my meeting will end in 10 minutes. So we'll hop into the other one when that's done. Okay. So I was really intrigued that he was so thorough in covering all the different fronts and what was going on. There you have it. Look at that. He
was thorough, but he also gave us a lot of maps in this book. I know you commented several times in the Boxer on how you loved he put the maps in there because, with all of the moving parts, it gets pretty difficult to keep track of everything in your head. So
yes,
bring up these maps. That was very, very handy.
Yeah. There's the Battle of Mons. Mm-hmm. And just look at the detail. I mean, it's like, what is happening, and then just imagine all these guys, all these headquarters, are like way behind the lines. This front's collapsing and no one's getting stuff in, not even in real time, but not even in like sensible time.
Well, and sad thing about the lack of communication is, when some of those places started to collapse, you have, and I can't remember what battle I'm even thinking of. Was it Ypres?
Might have been, yeah.
The flank was collapsing, and it could have been, or was it the middle? I can't even remember. I can't keep it straight.
There were so many.
Part of it that was collapsing, and the other side starts taking advantage, and they could have moved men, but they didn't communicate fast enough to move the men back and forth.
Yes.
If I remember that correct.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of that going on. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I think, maybe close to the end of the year that when the French commander is Joffrey, I guess it's Joffrey, kind of took control, and he was able to, cobble together a fairly strong French line anchored on the left by the British Expeditionary Force, led by Haig. But up until that time, wasn't Sir John French, who I loved how Max Hastings called him a poltroon.
But then he comes back and talks about him saving the day. Isn't he the guy that really saved the day for him?
John French?
Or I have the wrong guy.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think John French. I think there were other generals that did their job that weren't the head honcho, like Hugh Smith Dorian was a good guy. I think it was Haig that actually.
He gave a lot of praise to Haig that surprised. Yeah. And it really surprised me because everything I've always read about Haig was pretty negative.
Well, that's funny that you mentioned that because I have a book I want to show you soon that I finally picked up. I found a really good biography. Well, I don't know. I haven't read it yet, but a biography on Haig because I wanted to learn more about him, and so did you. So I will share that with everyone in the later on in the video here. But yeah, I think okay. So the things that surprised me were just the poor communication, the pettiness, and I was really disappointed in I guess if disappointed could be a way to describe it, but how the British Army hierarchy worked. And I think Hastings called it institutional chauvinism of the British Army. So there was that nose in the air type of deal at the time with British military. Let me see if I can find it. We have it on page 257 here.
Yeah, is this where he gave comparisons between the officers and just the regular man? He gave He gave a wonderful description of the differences between them and how the grunt was definitely the lower class, the poor of Britain, and the officers were all upper class guys. And it was
Yes.
pretty. It stood out to me because he talked about just the size differences. Like the officers were how many 3-4 inches taller, and they weighed several pounds more, and it was all because the grunts were all malnourished and everything because they're coming from the mines and they're coming from the slums. And
Yep.
I thought that was pretty interesting, that just the drastic differences between upper class and lower class.
Absolutely.
This book, we talked about it being a holistic approach. He gets into not just the war itself, but I found that the chapters that dealt with just society in general and what was going on the home front, I found that to be pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
I always do in these type of books. But yeah, I thought that was interesting, just the difference in size of the soldiers.
Yeah, that was something I'd never read about before or knew about. Yeah, like he says here, and also just how dismissive the British were of their allies. Like they really just didn't. They show up on the scene and they're like, "Look, let the French handle it themselves. We're not," He says here that there was a lot of pessimism in the British ranks at the time, if not quite despair. And that's not cool, because at this time Joffrey was, depending on them, and then you got this little squabble of like British, Oxford guys just hanging off, being kind of just dismissive, and the worst stereotype of like a British, arrogant, classism, that kind of stuff. That came across, in which it was disappointing to read about that. Obviously, things changed by the time of World War II, but yeah, there still was that remnant of status. Like, where were you in the ranking order in British society?
Yeah, just looking down your nose at people. It definitely showed up.
Totally. Well, let me see. I'm trying to see what some other notes I had. Did you have anything else that kind of jumped out at you?
Oh, I got things here and there. I found just the size of the armies. I took note of the size of the Serbian army. I thought it was pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. They had an army of 500,000, which compared to the other countries, that's relatively small. But when you consider they only had 4 million people and 500,000 of them are in the military, I found that to be pretty impressive.
Yes.
And then sadly for Serbia, 1/3 of the men lacked rifles. And, that's a problem with Russia had problems with that as well. Mm-hmm. But for them to be able to still put up a fight against Austria, despite the lack of men, the lack of weapons, I found that to be amazing. It reminded me of other things going on around the world.
Well, you know what? Yes, it does. And we don't have to name names, right? But when you say, like, when they had to take on Austria, all I can think of, we're going to go back to that lovely name, Konrad Hotzendorf. They might as well have called him Hotzendork or something, because Hastings I'm just going to say this right now, he was so contemptible of him. Okay, so I'm trying to find the quote here. This is from like chapter 12. He just... It's like it wasn't too hard for the Serbians to rout the Austrians, because they were like Keystone Cops out there. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that surprised me. I thought the Austrians were army was supposed to be some, like, a fairly well-tested army. I mean, I was thinking of the recent Napoleonic Wars and all this kind of stuff.
Pretty pathetic. You
would have thunk, right? And they're supposed to be like highly trained, officers, and they were just a crap show, if I may say so. I was reading these things and I'm like, but it was also so sad. All these Austrian young men, just, again, lives just thrown away by stupidity from their leaders, Okay.
Right. So you were talking about Conrad Hotzendorf.
Yes.
And Hastings. What did you say? Contemptible?
He portrayed him so contemptibly.
Yeah, and he first starts out with pointing out the fact that when Archduke Franz Ferdinand came through, good night. What's the name of the city?
Was it Belgrade?
No.
Well, he was touring Serbia, wasn't he?
Yeah, but what was the name of the city he was assassinated in?
Oh.
Sarajevo. When he was touring Sarajevo, Conrad Hotzendorf was the guy who was in charge of the entire parade route and was supposed to keep the Archduke safe. Now, we all know how that ended, right?
Yeah.
He couldn't even keep him safe. And so Hastings just kind of plays on this. Hastings is not a fan of Hotzendorf. And, he says, I quote, this is from page 29, he says, "It is hard to imagine a man less suited to his role, an epic incompetent, the most dangerous kind of officer by being both stupid and intensely energetic."
Yes.
So not only is he dumb, he's also very dumb and very actively dumb.
Yeah, actively dumb.
I laughed out loud to that when I read that early in the morning, and I imagine my wife probably woke up. I was laughing so hard, but I thought that was really good what Hastings said there. Yeah,
that one made me laugh as well. And to be more so energetic about your stupidity is that's like a recipe for disaster, and it was.
Yes, it is.
And it was. And he talks about it later on in the book as there's some maneuvering going on in Poland, or in that area, and he says the Russians' successes owed much more to Austrian blundering than to their own generalship or prowess. But listen to this. But Conrad, and he's talking about Conrad Hotzendorf, but Conrad's humiliation was incontestable. And he just has these digs.
Go ahead.
No, he makes these little digs with these turns of phrase throughout this book about Conrad Hotzendorf, the Austrian.
There's no doubt about where he stands on Conrad.
No, yeah, his humiliation was incontestable. So there were those moments in this book where I chuckled, despite the, just the horror of war and what was going on here. But a lot of it seems so, I'll go back to Keystone Cops, it's like people were bumbling and dropping the ball, not knowing what the left hand or the right hand was doing. And so there was a lot of that.
Yeah, there was a lot of buildup to war early on before the war actually started.
Yeah.
But I don't think they knew really what they were getting into. Lack of communication, lack of transportation, lack of this, that, and the other. Yep. Everybody liked the thought of war, but once they got into it, they were not ready.
Yep. It
was embarrassing.
They were not ready. You're right. Everyone just kind of went into some lockstep towards disaster. It's almost like it was fated to happen. It's like, how do we stop this? How can we stop this train? It's like it's coming right at you.
Well, even and I won't remember his exact words, but the Kaiser, who was all gung ho for war, even after it got started, his generals kind of took over and started rolling with it. And even he started to try to, kind of back off, according to Hastings. He backed off with his opinion, but they were, they had already crossed the Rubicon. It was past the point of no return. And his generals took it. Yep,
that's true. He did. Wilhelm, it was Wilhelm the second, I guess. He wanted to even kind of feel out, well, maybe we can have some type of negotiated something by the end of this year, 1914. But that didn't happen. And he doesn't really go past the point of, Silent Night, Holy Night, which was a lovely way to end the book, which was like, Oh, those little moments of the truce, which is why I wanted to read that book. I just did a book review on the Christmas truce of 1914 because I thought that was a good capstone to this study that we just did. But so not recognizing the fact that warfare was changing, the innovations in weaponry and just weaponry in general, the use of airplanes, just a lot of firsts going on in the world of warfare, but the tactics were not keeping pace. They were so old school, and they were learning as they went how to fight, which to a lot of men on either side, they didn't consider it, like manly, like having to hunker down behind something and take pot shots. To them, that's not an element of glory. It was supposed to be charging into the thing, but warfare was changing on a massive scale.
On a massive scale, you're right, and that was another thing that I think I pointed that out in our Voxer that really stuck out to me. Why in the world would you want to go charging into a machine gun with the chest all puffed out?
Yeah.
You could call me unmanly if you want. I'm ducking behind.
No, I hear you.
That baffled me.
I have to throw this in because I just came across it just to let people at home know I'm not making this up about how Hastings takes down Konrad Hotzendorf. Here's another great line after that massive disaster in Poland. If I can find the name of that battle, I'm not sure where it was, but says here, in the Habsburg camp, Konrad confessed dryly to his staff that if the Archduke Franz Ferdinand were still alive, he would have had the architect of this appalling military disaster himself taken out and shot. The guy was stupid.
Yeah.
He was the architect of that battle. And but he's saying, yeah, Franz Ferdinand would have shot the architect of this. Well, it's you idiot. Oh my God. Yeah. And then just we're talking about like communications were slow. Logistics were also really bad. And it's on both sides, but he mentions here with the Three Armies in Poland chapter that characteristics of the war on the Eastern Front, this is page 401, that it was characteristic of the war on the Eastern Front that logistics halted each side's advances in turn. The Russian and Austrian commissariats were alike feeble, and the descent of autumn rain turned unmetalled roads into quagmires. The Russians had much larger armies in Galicia than they could properly supply in a region of few railways. So, and everything, they were short on everything, he's saying here. Everything was short save men. And that was the problem with Russia. They had tons of men, not a lot of supplies, right? Mm-hmm. They were collecting things off of other dead soldiers, clothing, ammunition, weaponry. So, I don't know. It was just, I would love to go back and at some point in time, I'll reread this book again. I just thought Hastings, he just covers so much. And it's such a rich, dense book. You're going to learn so much from this, just the beginning 6 months of the war. But even then, like we were saying, he kind of covers the movements after the assassination and everyone mobilizes and goes to war. But you get a really good run-up, a good summary of the condition on the continent before the outbreak, before the assassination. So that was very helpful for me as a refresher to kind of know where everyone was at. But I don't know. I don't have nothing but great words about this read. I really enjoyed it.
I thought it was good. I totally agree with you. Some parts read faster than others, but that's how every book is, really.
Yeah.
And that just goes with your tastes and what you like to read or what part of history you like to read about.
Right.
So that was one thing I saw was, parts of it read faster than others for me, but it was probably like that for anybody. Mm-hmm. I really love the detail he put in, and it has made me want to, go find other works to go with this. We were looking at Sir Douglas Haig's memoirs. Weren't we looking at that at one?
Yes, I think you were looking to see if you could find a used copy of that somewhere.
Yeah, and I would like to get that. I would like to find some individual books on the different battles, which I have started to collect here and there. I got another book at the World War I Museum. This one's going to cover the whole war. I have another one I'm going to buddy read at the end of the year with Brian on the war. What was it? A World Undone, I think.
Oh, I've read that.
Yeah, and everybody says it's really good. So the great thing about Hastings' book is not only was it good, but it's made me want to go read more.
Yeah.
It just whet my appetite.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk about that because I don't know about you, but do you like to look at the bibliographies in the back of books?
I love bibliographies, and they get me in a lot of trouble with my wife because they make me buy books.
She's like, stop reading the damn bibliographies.
Yes, that is almost her word.
She's like, William, stop.
Put it away.
I know what you mean, though, because I love going through the bibliography. In fact, I was looking in the bibliography. I'm like, which one would be a good biography on Douglas Haig? Now, I know I'm going to be doing a used book haul video soon. I was hoping I could find it to show it to you here, but I will. You'll see a book coming from me on the next video of I found a book for it's about 13 or 14 bucks used, but it was in great condition. It's a really old biography. It's probably written in the 60s or 70s on Douglas Haig. Mm-hmm. I don't know why there's been such a dearth of Douglas Haig biographies. Like I did a whole search on them and there's some books that roll him into a bigger kind of, synthesis of the war. I was just trying to find a biography on the guy, and this was the one book I found, but I'll be showing that in an upcoming book haul. But yeah, like you, I was like, I want to know more about the battle on the Marne. I want to know more about Mons. I want to know more about the British Expeditionary Force and all the problems they were having, and especially communicating with the French generals,
I'd like to find one because it's an interesting topic and the kids always love it in class. And so I just need to build on my own knowledge just on the new technologies with the tank, the plane, the machine, and there was a bunch of them.
Yes.
And I would like to just find a book that covers those new technologies. Like I said, the kids would eat that up. They love learning about it for some reason. So,
and then for the adults here, I don't know if you noticed on Netflix, they had a German movie released in November. It's called All Quiet on the Western Front, based on the famous book.
I'm going to watch it. I haven't done it yet.
Oh, you have? Yeah, because let me just tell you, there's a scene where, and I read the book ages ago. It was a great book. It's powerful stuff. And and it was like right on the heels of us wrapping up this book, and I was watching it, and it was just like, this is just what we were reading, and there's a scene where like the German soldiers, they see the ground shaking, like stuff's rattling on the table in a trench, and you're like, what is this? And then like out of the smoke, you see this. It doesn't even resemble a modern day tank, but these were the first,
versions of them.
Yes. And it was like this, it was a creepy moment in the movie. And you're like, what would they must have felt seeing these things for the first time, and also even more sinister was like the use of, gases and things that just
flamethrowers.
Oh, they showed the flamethrowers too. And it was like a scene from hell. So when you get to that part, definitely not anything a child wants to, you can't, make sure.
Well, we watched the 79 or 79 version of All Quiet on the Western Front. We watch that every year in class.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Love it. And you would think that with it being an older movie, they would be, but they actually love it. They really get into it. And then of course, at the end, they're always mad at me for showing it to them because how the movie ends. But,
I know.
They're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know. Oh my God.
No, I have plans to watch the Netflix one. I just haven't. I don't have Netflix. My daughter does. So
okay.
I have to wait for the time that we can sit down together.
Yeah. Well, I highly recommend it. Let me know when you have watched it, because those scenes are really, I mean, there's some gruesome stuff going on there, but but that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, so just as literature, All Quiet on the Western Front, I would recommend anyone read that. If you want to, if you're new to World War I guess what I'm trying to say is, as we maybe kind of wrap up this book, take a piece of fiction, like All Quiet on the Western Front, read it, kind of get a feel for what the common soldier might have experienced. And it doesn't even matter what side it was on. Like this one is a German soldier, but they were all feeling it and experiencing it. And then I would suggest this is a great book to get your feet wet with, this is situation in Europe and on the continent, in England and then on the continent, and just where all the different monarchies were at the time when this powder keg blew up. And Max Hastings just writes wonderfully, and you will laugh out loud at his takedown of Conrad Hotzendorf.
I don't think we mentioned it. It's a Alfred A. Knopf book, and it was written. Published in 2013 is when it was published.
Okay.
And just to showcase the book just a little bit, look at these end papers.
Oh yes,
isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, and then
that's the front side. Yeah, now there's the back side,
and then that's what you're left with. It's very stark. It's like, all that just got all blown away. Yeah. Barbara Tuchman is another great historian to read. Her work on, is The Guns of August. Have you read that one, Bill? I have not read. I own it, but I haven't read it yet. Yeah, that one is, talk about, she is meticulous. That one, it really takes you almost like minute by minute through the crisis and takes a real political view of it too. Like she's really getting into the inside of just how all the different countries just, I don't know. They just, I guess there was another book called The Sleepwalkers. Yeah. And it was like they just sleepwalked right into this, Yes,
somebody else was going to read that one. And it was one that I
want to read that one.
I don't think I have it, and I wanted to get it.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I've got.
Yeah. I think The Sleepwalkers I can't remember his name, Christopher something, but Barbara Tuchman, Guns of August. I also loved her book that I guess you could say it was a prequel of sorts, and it was called The Proud Tower. And it talked about, society and the cultures that were going on right before the war, before everything just went to hell, and that one just really stuck with me. It's a beautiful read and a beautiful rendering of a time now far long gone, but The Proud Tower I really enjoyed. But there's a wealth of World War I books out there, but I think start with Max Hastings. Yeah, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading this one with you, Bill.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you. No, thank you. So what's our next buddy read going to be? We haven't even decided.
I don't know. Do we tie it into that ever famous event, Historathon 2023?
Yes, we're going to do a shout out for Historathon 2023.
Yep. If we want to tie it into that, maybe we'll have to discuss that.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if I'll do it in this first quarter.
Yeah, I'm not quite ready.
2023 in the first quarter. First of all, it's just not my it's not in my wheelhouse, needless to say.
Yeah.
And I would rather have something I'm a little bit more comfortable about.
I think you and I could probably do another one maybe in the third quarter. I think that time frame is more, we could really break it up into something really fun. That sounds good. I know I've got one in the fourth quarter going with Brian. Okay. We're going to do that. The World Undone. Isn't that the name of it? A World Undone. That's it. Jeffrey Myers or something Myers. Yeah, that we're going to do that one in the fourth quarter. I think you'll love it. That was a great 1-volume history of the war. Well, and before Historathon was birthed, we were going to do that one in January. We were going to do that right off the get-go, but we decided to move it back and put it in with the reading event. Well, that makes sense.
Excuse me.
Wow. Well, there's a lot going on. So everyone, we encourage you to join along with Historathon, which is just a year-long quest to, give history its due and spend time reading quality history on different periods of time, learning something, challenging yourself.
That's what we're doing here in the first quarter.
Yes.
For me, anyway.
Yes. Prehistory to 500 AD, right?
Yep.
Or CE. Yeah.
Not my cup of tea, but I am learning stuff. That's the key. I'm learning stuff.
That's right. That's right. So I need to actually show what ones I'm attempting to read. I've seen people been doing piles of possibilities. I'm like, there's no way I could read 5 books in this quarter. But you know what? I could show some ideas for other people and then just say, these are the 2 I'm selecting,
Yeah, I think I'm going to get 3 of them done. I'm reading the one on that introduction to the Babylonians.
Okay.
First, and it's only 150 pages. I'll have that done midway through the week. And then I'm going to read Cleopatra by Stacy Schiff.
Yes.
Everybody says is awesome.
I need to read it.
And then that one book you sent me.
Oh yeah.
About the
Egypt's Golden Couple.
Yes, Egypt's Golden Couple.
That's Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Yep, that's them.
Yeah, those are the 3 books I'm for sure going to read in these first 3 months.
Oh, fantastic.
I get to the other 2. If not, that's okay.
That's right. Yeah. Wow.
Because I got lots of other stuff I want to read too. So
yeah, totally. Wow. Well, anyway, guys, we could sit here and talk all day, Bill and I, but but all I can say is this was a really great buddy read. I always learn something new. There was laughter, there was tears. Sorry. There was a lot going on in this book, but it was fantastic. And I've read a couple of other books by Max Hastings, and I hope you'll continue reading him too, Bill.
Yeah, I've got a few of them on my shelves.
Excellent.
This was my intro, and so down the road.
Excellent. Well, okay. Well, until next time, BookTube, thanks for joining us for our book chat.
Yeah, thank you for coming out.
Yep. And
turning us on anyway.
Yeah. And do you want to close us out with your traditional?
Yes, I do. And BookTube, I know you got a lot of books to read. So until next time, happy reading.
There it is.